A horrific scene really unfolded in New Orleans just a few hours after New Year's Eve celebrations kicked off. A man rammed his truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street, killing at least 14 people and injuring over 30 people in what is being called an act of terrorism. The truck the suspect used to carry out the attack was found with IEDs, weapons, and an ISIS flag. When you see all of these emerging details, what sticks out to you?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that the war on terror was declared to be over, some maybe 6 or even 10 years ago. It was premature. The threat posed by Sunni jihadism, as we would call it, Sunnis making up roughly 80% of the Muslim world, it hasn't gone away. And so whether it's ISIS or Al Qaeda, the threat persists, the ideology remains. Thankfully, it's still a very small minority interpretation of the faith, but it is still significant. And we know that ISIS still exists in pockets of the Middle East and in Africa. We know the same about Al Qaeda. And now, in fact, we've seen an Al Qaeda group take over an entire country. We're talking about Syria. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham just conquered Syria from the Assad regime. So what we're looking at really is the fact that this has not gone away. There will be states run by jihadis. There will be cells operating in the United States or in Europe run by jihadis. This, of course, comes just after a Christmas market suffered a similar kind of an attack in Europe just about a week ago now. So this is a phenomenon I expect we're going to see more and more of this. It's hard to track, especially when these operatives are, that they're carrying out attacks in the form of cells as opposed to more formal structures. That means that this is an intelligence problem. And I suspect that right now we've got a lot of people at the FBI scrambling to figure out how many more possible cell members there may be. And of course, looking for links to that exploding truck outside of a Trump facility in Las Vegas.
You're saying that the war on terror is still ongoing despite it being declared all but dead a few years back. Where exactly is ISIS the strongest, and who now is the leader of ISIS? Because as we know, back in October of 2019, al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, was killed by the United States.
Yeah, I think that right now we're looking at more of a flat leadership structure, if you will. Same kind of thing is happening within Al Qaeda, by the way. We had bin Laden and then Ayman al-Zawahiri as number two. But you don't really hear about the new leaders of Al Qaeda. You don't hear about the new leaders of ISIS. They're a bit more of an anonymous force right now. Perhaps they've been undergoing some kind of a new leadership structure. But I suspect that if we continue to see this kind of activity, whether it be in the form of lone wolves or in the form of, kind of secret cells that are animated here in the United States, as well as conquests of states and territory in the Middle East, I suspect we'll probably see some new figures emerge. I think there is a danger, though, and I think we've seen this over time of, beginning to think that, well, if we take out this one leader, well, then we will have solved the problem. And I think what we were able to show over the course of really the last 25 years is that even if you do take out some of these top leaders, you still have a problem. The movement's ideology continues to power this, and there will be new leaders that crop up in their place. So we're looking, again, this has always been viewed as a long war. It's going to go through peaks and valleys. I think we really did get, I don't want to say sidetracked because I think that's not fair, but I think that over the last 14 months since the attacks of October 7th and Iran waging a 7-front war in the Middle East, I think we all were sort of under the impression that the Sunni jihad problem of Al Qaeda and ISIS, that it kind of receded into the background, and that, Shiite Islam, radical Shiite Islam, more associated with the Iranian regime, that was the new threat. I think what we need to come to terms with right now is that both can be a threat at the same time, that the Middle East is still a problematic area with ideological challenges that we have yet to solve, And that's, of course, happening while we're also looking at, a war in Ukraine, an aggressive China. There are a lot of fronts that we're going to need to tackle. The new administration coming in on January 20th, the Trump administration, is going to have to deal with, I think, a much more challenging landscape than it had dealt with as compared to the previous administration.